Shalom, dear friends, and welcome to my channel. This is Finding Shalom. It's all about finding peace and shalom, which means tranquility and wholeness, completeness, peace from so many things. It has so many meanings, the word shalom, and I have felt like I couldn't go on making videos about peace and about shalom until I got this one video out of my way, and that is a video on grief. And when you're walking through grief, sometimes it's hard to find shalom, sometimes it's hard to find the peace, but I will tell you at the same time, I felt God walking with me this entire time, and especially around the actual week of my mom's death and the week of her funeral. And I actually felt the peace that surpasses all understanding. And it was incredible. I saw God in every detail that He took care of. I saw His hand move, and maybe I was numb at the beginning because there's so many decisions to make, so many things going on that they catch your attention. Because the grief that settled in later got a little confusing. And in fact, making this video has been so hard because I'm an overthinker and I want it all in a nice, neat package. I want it put in an outline and what I'm going to say. And I'm going to tell you, grief is, I can't figure it out. It's confusing. And how do you put that in an outline? So I have no outline today. I have no idea where this conversation is officially going to go. I do have all the thoughts that have been in my head the last 4.5 months. My mom passed away March 29th, and her funeral was August 6th, I believe. Even those are starting to get cloudy, the dates, but at the same time, every time the 29th rolls around of each of the last 4 months, it's been like, oh, that's right. This is the 1 month anniversary, the 2 month anniversary, the 3 month anniversary, the 4 month anniversary. And I'm also going to tell you that if you have had a loss and you've lost a child, that's probably a whole different kind of grief. And if you lost a mom that was just good to you and loved you, that might be a different kind of grief. I struggled with my grief because it was confusing and it wasn't the same as everybody else's. I love my mom. She had a great mission in life, but my mom also did a lot of hurting us through her own mental illness, through her own struggles. And so hashing through all of that. And then I'm going to tell you the other thing is, harder than my grief has been watching my dad grieve. And that's, I think, what brought me to my knees today and said I need to make this video, is that I got a text. I had just been in an appointment this morning with one of my brides, and today is actually when I'm filming this, Thursday, August 10th. And yesterday was a chaotic day of doctor's appointments for my mother-in-law, and then it was their anniversary, and I took them on a surprise trip, and we did all kinds of fun stuff, and it was just exhausting but fun. And today I got kind of back into the swing of things. I do have appointments later today with my mother-in-law for her eyes, but I had an appointment this morning. I was going to start sewing, going to, get back to the old grindstone, and the old grindstone is what keeps me from grieving. It's the thing that kind of keeps me numb to everything, like I don't have to think about it if I stay busy. And then this month, God kind of shut a few things down to say, no, you don't want to stay so busy that you don't grieve and walk through this. Like I said, I'm rambling because I don't really know where this is. If you have had grief in your life, you might understand this, that it's confusing because it doesn't look like anybody else's grief. And when people tell you, I'm so sorry, I lost my mom and this is how I felt, I have a hard time relating because my mom was not like any other mom. And that's for another day. But gosh, my grief was confusing. And maybe yours is confusing. Maybe it doesn't seem like what everybody else is going through. And I'm an analyzer. I'm an overthinker. So I'm like, okay, this is the process of grief. So what step am I on? And how do I walk through that? And when that didn't look like that, it gets really confusing. You're like, I don't know what, my dad once said, I'm on level such and such of grief. And I'm like, oh man, I think I'm still in denial. I think I'm at the beginning, and I don't know that I'm ever going to get out of it. But anyways, maybe you guys can understand that. But I wanted to encourage you guys today, and I wanted to make this video because I know that there's a lot of people grieving, and I wanted, on so many levels, my brain is like rapid firing because there's so many angles, so many things I want out of this. And so what I did right before I hit record, I just got on my knees and I said, God, there's people out there that are grieving. What do they need to hear from you? And so maybe what I want is not my words to come through, but his words to you. That he's with you. And that he can be your peace. And he can be that peace that surpasses all understanding. About a week ago, I realized, this is 2023. And it just popped in my head, the 23rd Psalm. I should have been reading that all along from January 1st on, because it fits this year. In fact, I didn't plan anything, but I did throw my Bible down and here on the table, and I went and grabbed a bunch of my journals, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But let me go to Psalms 23. Maybe you can grab your Bible and turn to it, because you might have it in a different translation. I like to read it in multiple translations just so that I can hear it different each time. You can do that on your Bible app as well. So this is kind of what I'd like to say to my dad right now. And maybe I'll send him Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And this is the part. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You probably have heard that in the King James. Let me pull up my Bible app really quick. Go to Psalms 23. Let me switch it to the King James. And that is verse 4. And maybe you memorized it this way. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Maybe you're walking in the shadow of death. It's kind of what I feel like. My dad is definitely walking in the shadow of death. He buried his dog today. In January 2023, he buried his sister, his last sibling. He said to me on that drive home from California, I am officially an orphan. I'm an orphan because my parents are gone, all my siblings are gone, and now my last sibling is gone. But he still had my mom. And then in March 29th, my mom passed away, and in April, beginning of April, he buried my mom. And now here we are, August 10th. August 10th. and he just buried his dog that has been with him for a long time. And he said to me, he never uses this word, but he says, I just buried Chiquita. And he told me some things. It was hard watching her the last little bit, just getting worse and worse and worse. And she looked at me with those eyes, and like she was saying, please help me. And he says, I couldn't help her. He says, 2023 sucks. I've never heard my dad use that word, sucks. It was a bad word when I was growing up. But that's the truth. 2023 has really sucked for a lot of us. And maybe we're in the shadow of death. I didn't plan on crying, but I think that's inevitable. Sorry. The shadow of death. Are you living in the shadow of death? Maybe it's not physical death. Maybe it's financial death. Maybe it's the death of a marriage. The death of a relationship. Maybe a death of the relationship with your children. The shadow of death. But God says, David wrote this knowing he was running for his life. He was promised to be king. He was anointed as king, and then spent how many years after that running from death? He was in the shadow of death. And we don't know when he wrote this. It could have been too when his son Absalom actually came against him and tried to kill him, and he went running, and he went through the Kidron Valley and went running away. And he ran for his life with everything as king, and he ran out the Kidron Valley. Jesus walked through that same valley. You might be walking through the valley of shadow of death, but God says, I am with you. So even though you walk through the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So Psalms 23 has been super special to me. So let me just read the 23rd Psalm to you in the King James with all the these and the thous. But it's how I memorized it as a child, and it's how it comes back to me in my memory when I need him most. And Jesus is our shepherd. It says in John that he is the shepherd. He, I believe, calls himself the shepherd. And a shepherd takes care of your needs. He stays with you. He searches for you when you're lost. He goes out and finds you to bring you back into the fold. He makes sure that you've got enough water and enough food, and that when you're walking through the shadow of death, he's right by you. And he's walking through it with you all this year. He's walking through it with me. Let me read it in the King James. Excuse all the these and thous. But the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I definitely felt that this year as I sat by my mom's bedside and praying that maybe she could be restored, maybe she could be healed, but mostly take her out of her misery and take her to heaven. And that's the prayer that God answered. But then praying for my dad too, that he would be comforted. And in those weeks and in that time, God sent all these people into our lives. There was a gentleman that he was filling in for my dad's pastor, and he happened to be the chaplain at the hospital at the time we arrived. And he ran down to meet my dad in the emergency room as they were working on my mom, and they wouldn't let me or my dad in at that time. And we sat in the waiting room not knowing what was going on behind the scenes, and he prayed with us right there in the middle of everything. And then he knew the hospital and all that. We have a hospital that has all these back corridors that you're like, okay, we parked over here by emergency, but now they've wheeled us through all these different areas. And now my daughter and my mother-in-law and my husband wanted to come in and say their goodbyes to my mom, but we didn't know how to get them to where we were. And he knew the back corridors. I'll go get him. I'll go down. And he just, for the first quite a few hours, just kept taking us back and forth and making sure we were taken care of, making sure our needs were met, making sure the nurses knew what we were. God put the right person at the right time that just came in and comforted us and directed us. And then there was just my daughter. I've told you this before. She hadn't been home since 2020. She left right after the thing was released, I think May 1st, for all the businesses to be put down, and she went to Alabama to start her journey into her PhD. And that's the last time I saw her in person. And here we are, 2023. So it had been 3 years since I saw my daughter in person. And she happened to be here, headed to a conference in Washington, and she stopped for a layover. We kind of made it so she had an extended layover, and we picked her up at the airport in about 2 hours away, brought her here. And she happened to be here when everything went down, and she was able to come in and say goodbye to my mom. My son was here. He could do it, make the trip. My other son, he couldn't make it right then, but he made it for the funeral, which he wasn't able to. Usually he lives in Colorado, and he's a truck driver, and usually he's all across the country. And he happened to be able to get a load come in this direction. There were just people coming in that kind of helped us. I don't even know how you put it. My mom and I, if you knew me for any length of time, you know that we had a rough relationship. And my relationship with her was connected to my relationship with God. And it was a real struggle, because she's the one that taught me about Jesus, and she's the one that I learned so much in my early years from. And then when we're not sure what it was, but maybe a mental illness took over, and there was a lot going on in her life, and it was overwhelming. Some of that abuse came through the voice of the Bible and the voice of God. And I actually left the church for a very long time because of my relationship with my mom. And she was such a strong voice in help bringing people to know the Lord. And a lot of people, it's so hard on video to say, a lot of people struggled with her. I knew at her funeral that there would be people that hadn't spoken to her in years. Some of close family members that kind of stopped talking to her, or blocked her, or put up the barriers like, it's too much. And so it was this hard road of all of our frustrations, and now what do we do with this? And God brought in this chain this flow, of people who just started texting on her phone, telling their testimony of how she had changed their lives and their walk with God for the better. And it was such an opposite thing to the people who were as close to her. And so I almost needed to hear it. Then people started walking into the hospital and wanting to visit her and say goodbye to her. And they sat there at her bedside telling her, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know Jesus. And I watched one after another, and I was in charge of her phone. And I had to text people. Like, she was working so hard. Every day of the week was like either a prayer group or a good news club or something. So my dad said, can you please tell all these people that she's not going to be able to make her the things that she was supposed to do that. And we need to get people to replace her in those areas. She was so important in so many of those areas. So God brought this wave of people's testimonies. And for the first time, I saw my mom. Oh dear. Sorry. For the first time, I saw my mom through the community's eyes, and I realized that even in her brokenness, even through a possible mental illness, even through all of the frustration that a lot of her family members had, she was on a mission for Christ, and she didn't let anything stop her. And there were hundreds and hundreds. People who came to the funeral, people who came to the hospital, people who started texting her. People didn't realize that I had her phone. They were texting her text messages, just not knowing that she even got them, just telling them, Carol, I heard, that it's not going to be long, and I have to type this out. I have to tell you what a difference you made in my life. So I believe that God did that so that I can see who my mom was before she officially passed away, because I got to tell her, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you that no matter what people said, about you, you just kept following Jesus. I went home after an all-night staying by her bedside. I told my dad, none of us are getting any sleep. You need to go home and go to sleep. So he tried to go home, take a little nap. And then he said, I got to be back. I got to be with her. So he went back and stayed with her. And then I said, well, I got to go back and take a shower. It's been like over 24 hours and I'm it's not good. And I'm kind of groggy. So I tried to take a nap, but I couldn't. And the song playing, I tried to just put some praise music in. And the song, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. That came on, and I knew that was my mom. That once she decided to follow Jesus, there was no turning back. So the grief that I've actually been walking is that separation that I've tried to have between my mother and what I do for God. I had to keep a lot of this hidden from her because of I couldn't have her mix with that. Because it would make me feel like I was just being my mom. So it's just very tangled. And so there was a grief and a guilt in not including my mom in so many of those things. And so it's just been a different kind of grief, I think that everybody not only grieves different because of their personality, but they also grieve different because of their relationship and how it was. I didn't have a mom that would go shopping with me and hang out at the mall or do mommy things, The last time I went out to eat with her, we had made tomato jam. See, that was another thing God did. He put it on my heart that I needed to make tomato jam and record it. And I put it on our other channel last September. And then right after that, we went to go out to lunch. And I'm like, good, I get to go have lunch with my mom. And we went over to this little local hamburger shop, and I said, well, go ahead and pick a seat, and I'll carry it over. And she picked a seat. She said she wanted to go sit by the kids to watch the kids play on the jungle gyms, but she had another motive in mind. She had seen a group of Mormon missionary gentlemen sitting, eating, or come over with the hamburgers and everything. And she's sitting there with her purse on her thing, and she has in her hand a bunch of tracts about who the real Jesus is, and she wants to talk to the Mormon missionaries. And I was like, no, Mom, can't I just have lunch with you? Does it always have to be a mission? And you know what? With that woman, it always was a mission, because she wanted everybody to know about Jesus, and she wanted everybody to get to heaven. She wanted everybody there that she came in contact with. So yeah, I grieve a little bit over the fact that I didn't have a mom that just sat and had lunch with me or went shopping with me or did, things with. I mean, we did tea parties and stuff like that, but no matter what you did with my mom, it was always going to end up her talking about Jesus. And she always felt like we all needed to improve our relationship with him, no matter what we did. And nothing was good enough, So anyway, I digress. What I really wanted to talk to you about today was abiding. As you guys know, my journal's here. I have a word of the year that I do every year. And these are all my journals all the way through, and somewhere around 2010, 11, 12, something like that, I started picking words of the year. And then my words became so big, they each have a journal of their own. Well, when I was reading the 23rd Psalm, I was like, man, my word should have been abide this year. But in 2020, that was my word, abide, and that is this journal right here. And I learned that year to stay under the wings of my Father and stay under the protection of my shepherd. Let him protect me. And there were so many things that I learned. I have a whole thing. When you abide, here's one right here. It just says, you are so good to me, God. Your plans are better than my plans. Your ways are better than my ways. Abide. In other words, if you stay under his wings, his plans, he will walk through life with you. There are so many verses in the Bible about abiding. Like this right here. And this goes with the 23rd Psalm, and it goes with walking through the valley of the shadow of death. When you abide, we could use Jesus as the example. In here I said Jesus had a deep connection with God the Father. God the Father was his focus, his entire focus. He made sure to connect with him in prayer at the start of each day, throughout the day, and at the end of the day. This gave him strength and power when he lived as a human here on earth. Jesus understood what it's like to be human and to have all of the human emotions and human needs and human things. And he was the perfect example of that. He abided in God. He stayed close to God. He stayed in prayer. He got off by himself and was alone with God so that God could give him the strength. Jesus lived and he lives his life out of his relationship with God. That filled him, that equipped him. Then from that, or out of that, he lived his life. This is the key to peace, strength, and power. If you're going through grief right now, if you're going through a hard time, a valley of the shadow of death, the death of something big in your life, abide in Jesus. Abide in your Heavenly Father. Stay under His protection. Use the 23rd Psalm and walk through it. Keep Him by your side, and then He's going to give you, in the hardest moments, a peace that surpasses all understanding. When you should be flipping out, when you should be losing your mind, when you should be screaming out in pain, you'll feel this, I feel you next to me, God. I see that detail that you did. I see that moment that you did that. My mom's funeral, itself, little details. It landed on Passover, and her, the night before at her viewing, and that had very significant meaning. The last couple of years I've been studying the Passover, and I've been studying all of those little things, and so I just felt God's like, see what I did there? You know what? Your mom's death was sudden and hard, but I planned it to the detail. She's in heaven now. She's having Passover and Easter with me. She's enjoying herself, and I've taken care of details for you. There was we went there and found out that her entire funeral had been paid for ahead of time. My mom had picked, or she didn't pick everything out, but she paid for everything. And my dad had gone in, he said right before we went in, now Christa, your mom and I talked about, we don't have a lot of money, so we're okay with just, the simplest casket, a pine, just whatever, just something very simple. And we walked in, and he saw this big, beautiful blue casket, and her favorite color was blue. And it was so pretty, had a beautiful pillow, and it had these beautiful praying hands, because my mom was a prayer. And he said in his heart, I just wish I could afford to buy her that. And he ended up asking the guy who was working with us and said, how much for that casket? I probably can't even afford it. And the guy looked at the paperwork and he said, it's already paid for. You can have that casket. And my dad, his heart was just like, oh, thank you. And little details. Here's a little side detail. My son, Andrew, we adopted him when he was 10 years old. And I am not someone who is around kids and think I've got to adopt a lot of kids and I love kids. And, I think kids are awesome, but I'm just not the one who would be in the church nursery working with them. And so it wouldn't be me that would be adopting extra children or having lots of children. But God gave me a vision right when we found out about Andrew. I was in the backyard kind of weeding, and it was like, oh, this kid in my daughter's class, I've gotten to know him, and he's being put up for adoption. He's probably going to end up in the foster care system. And I started praying for him to have a good family. And I was thinking of other families that were thinking of adopting him and everything. And I was like, Lord, just give him a really good home and give him protection and be with him and walk with him. And I was just praying that whatever family he ended up would be just perfect for him, an amazing Christian family and all this kind of stuff. And I had a vision, and I was walking up, kind of in heaven, I guess, up to the judgment seat or the throne of God. And I kind of felt it was like a not good feeling, kind of a disappointment from God. And up walks next to me a gentleman that looks really rough, and kind of, you can tell he had a hard life. And I didn't know who this gentleman was. And then instantly I had the second part of that, where I was walking again up to the throne room, and I had the most incredible feeling, and it was an incredible feeling of well done, good and faithful servant. And then walked up next to me was a man in a gray suit. And he put his arm around me, and I knew exactly who he was. He was my son, and I was proud of him, and I loved him. And I've hung on to that vision and haven't said anything about it and everything. Didn't tell Andrew about it. Told very few people about it. But Andrew has been a little estranged from our family for a few years. He just felt hurt by us, and he stopped speaking to us, and we tried. It's a long story, but he didn't speak to us for quite a few years. And then just about a year or so ago, he started to talk to us again and just have little communications. And I think he was working on some things with his therapist. I mean, he has a rough life. He has a lot to work through. He has a lot of hurt and a lot of pain in his life. And I won't go into all of that. But I picked up the phone and I said, Andrew, just want to let you know, Nanny, that's what they called their grandma, Nanny passed away. And he was really upset. And I said, I know that you're working and it's really, really hard for you to come up here to Idaho, and I know that truck driving, you might be in another part of the country and it's hard to get over here, but we would love to, if you can, to be at the funeral. He moved heaven and earth, and he made it here, and all of a sudden he's here in Idaho right before the funeral, and I go over to see him at his other grandma's house, and he pulls out a bag and he's so excited. He goes, Mom, because we had asked him also to be a pallbearer if he could make it. And he goes, check out my new outfit. And I open it up, and it's a gray suit. And I knew that was God's wink. Andrew's going to be okay. And I'm showing you through the gray suit because you thought that you messed up. There's a long thing about how I thought I've screwed up. God had a purpose for him, and I did my best raising him, and I think we screwed it up, and now he's on the wrong road, and what are we going to do? And he shows up in a gray suit. And as I watched him lead the rest of the cousins, all of his cousins, the boys that all carried the casket in his gray suit, I realized God was, once again, that week, he just gave me wink after wink after wink of, it's going to be okay. I got this. Everything's going to be okay. It doesn't look good, but everything's going to be okay. I have a plan. I knew when your mom was going to pass away. I know how Andrew's going to turn out. I know how your other children are. I've got them in my hands. I'm taking care of them. I'm taking care of your mom. I'm taking care of your dad. I'm taking care of everything. And if I go back to the week of, I can really feel secure in God's love. And I can really feel secure that he knows what he's doing. But then my mind wanders to all the worries of my dad and him grieving and all the grief that he's had this year. What a horrible year. 2023, like my dad said, 2023 sucks. But I want to text my dad Psalms 23. Your shepherd is walking by you in the valley of the shadow of death. He's right by your side. He's going to lead you to green pastures. He's going to lead you beside still waters. He's going to make sure that you've got the food, everything you need. And I think that in this confusing, horrible video that had no direction, but I think my message that I want to say to all of you, no matter where you're at, whether you're already in the green pastures, whether you're by the still waters, or whether you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, your shepherd is right with you All you have to do is ask him to be there. All you have to do is abide in him. Let me tell you about my words. If you want shalom, learn to obey, because he has a good and perfect will for you. He will restore you. He will help you. I don't know where my rebuild one is. He will help you rebuild your life. Lean into his love. Lean into his love. He loves you. And he'll teach you how to love better. He'll give you freedom. He's going to trade you your ashes for beauty. He's going to trade you your prison for freedom if you learn his ways and do all those things. And then a big one, you got to learn how to trust him. And how you learn how to trust him is you abide. Abide in him, and he will take care of you. And then my word of the year this year, which I think I'm going to probably have to study a whole nother year because I haven't had a lot of time to finish this one. Worship. When you learn who God is and his character, and that he's your good shepherd, and that he's protecting you, and that all you have to do is just lean into him and say, God, come and show me who you are. Come and be with me. Come and hold me. Let me just be protected in your wings. You're going to end up worshiping in good times and in bad, and you'll be able to worship in the valley of the shadow of death. So, anyway, I don't know if any of that made sense. I would love to hear in the comments if you're grieving or if you've walked through grief. I'd love to hear in the comments what God has showed you through your walk through grief. But I want to leave you with that. Your shepherd is with you. If you ask him to be with you, if you choose for him to be your shepherd, by repenting of your sins, turning to him and saying, God, I want you to be my God. Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to do your will, and I want to hide under your wings. So, thank you guys for being part of this journey with me. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. And I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget, we're studying Acts every Friday, and we're back on our regular schedule. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Shalom, dear friends, and I mean that. Shalom, I wish you freedom. I wish you wellness. I wish you security, prosperity, peace. I wish you that even in the valley of the shadow of death, you will have peace that surpasses all understanding. Shalom, dear friends. I love you. Till the next video.